The housewarming was Mara's idea. She said it should feel curated, like the homes and design magazines. Perfect lighting, little canapes on trays, string quartet music playing softly through hidden speakers. I didn't argue. I just showed up with a homemade coffee cake and the set of stoneware mugs they'd admired in a catalog but never bought. One of the mugs, matte black, wide-handled, heavy in the palm, was in my hand when it happened. "Mom," Everett said, glancing toward the hallway. "Do you think you could give us a little space to settle in?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" Mara stepped in, smiling too wide. "Just for a bit. You've been amazing, truly, but we're still adjusting, and it might be easier for us emotionally to have the place to ourselves. Start fresh, you know." My son didn't look at me when she spoke. He adjusted his cufflink and cleared his throat like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words, or wouldn't. I stood in the kitchen I had paid for, the cabinets I'd chosen, the tile I'd selected after hours of comparing samples. I'd spent half my pension and all of my savings to buy this home in their name. I hadn't asked for anything in return, not even a room. I looked down at the mug in my hands. Everett finally met my eyes. "It's not personal, Mom. We just need a little space, that's all." Mara touched his arm, then added, "We'll call you this week. Maybe you can come by for coffee when things are less hectic." I set the mug down on the counter carefully, gently. "Of course," I said. Just before I reached the front door, Mara's voice called out behind me, "Oh, wait! Group photo!" I paused, unsure whether to turn back or keep walking. She waved me over, bright and chipper like nothing had happened minutes before. "We need one in front of the fireplace," she said, her voice breezy. "Ever, come here, stand between your parents." Then she hesitated. "Oh, actually..." She took the camera from her friend's hands and offered it to me. "Would you mind taking it? You're better at framing than me," she added quickly, like it would soften the sting. I looked at the group already forming in front of the hearth. Everett, his friends from law school, Mara's sister and parents, all smiling wide. The fireplace I had paid to have custom built glowed behind them, a warmth I wasn't part of. I took the camera without a word and lifted it, focused, adjusted the angle. 1, 2, 3, I said as if the numbers could steady my hands. After a few clicks, I lowered the camera. Mara came over and checked the photos. "Perfect," she said, not looking at me. I handed her the camera and didn't wait for another word. I opened the door and stepped out into the cool evening. I could still hear laughter behind me, muffled now, sealed in. I passed the small chalkboard sign near the gate that read, "Welcome home, Everett and Mara," in looping cursive. My name had never been on that sign. I walked to my car slowly, each step heavier than the last. My shoes sank slightly into the dewy lawn. It was beautiful here, quiet, almost serene. When I reached the car, I opened the door and sat for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel. The mug I'd given them, the one I left behind, was visible through the kitchen window. Mara had placed it high on a shelf. I backed out of the neighborhood without turning on the radio. The silence felt truer. The guest room had bay windows that faced east. I'd picked it for the morning light. Soft, warm, gentle. The kind of light that makes you want to sit quietly with a book and a hot cup of coffee. I had imagined putting a small rocking chair in the corner, a throw blanket folded over the arm, maybe a little lamp with a pull chain. "You'll always have a place here." Mara had said that, resting her hand lightly on my shoulder during the final walkthrough. "This room is yours whenever you need it." That was before the deed was signed. That was before I sold the condo I'd lived in for 17 years. Before I drained the retirement account I'd spent my entire adult life building. I was never one for extravagance. No cruises, no designer handbags, no remodeling my kitchen just to match a trend. I'd saved for stability, for family, for legacy, and I gave it all to them. The little cottage I'd once dreamed of near the Oregon coast, gone. I'd clipped photos of it from magazines over the years. White shiplap walls, a blue metal roof, a garden just big enough to keep my hands busy and my mind quiet. I'd let that dream go without bitterness. I told myself this gift was bigger, better. They'd build memories here, raise children, plant their roots. I never thought I'd be excluded from those roots. Now, when I picture the guest room, I don't see the chair or the blanket anymore. I see a neatly made bed no one's offered me. I see walls painted in a color I chose, framing a space I'll never enter again. That morning, I opened my bank app and stared at the balance. It was still enough to live on if I stretched it carefully. No more dreams, just management. I closed the app and walked to the kitchen, poured myself the last of the coffee I brewed yesterday. I warmed it in the microwave and sat at the table. From the window I could see the sky lighten. Somewhere, a new day was beginning, just not for me. I found the photo by accident, tucked behind a stack of utility bills on the sideboard. It was from a long ago 4th of July. Everett was maybe 7, grinning with a popsicle in one hand and a sparkler in the other. His cheeks were sticky. His shoes were always untied. I remember chasing him through the grass that day, begging him to drink water and stay out of the road. I sat down with the frame in my lap, holding it like it might break. For a moment, I let myself remember what it felt like to be needed by him. All those mornings making lunches he'd complain about but still eat. The way he'd rest his head on my shoulder after long swim meets, too tired to talk but unwilling to let go. When he went to college, I stitched curtains for his dorm room, dark blue with tiny white dots like stars. He called them weird, but they stayed up the whole year. Now I didn't know if he used curtains at all. I reached for my phone. His contact was still pinned at the top of my favorites. I pressed it without thinking, bringing the phone to my ear before I could talk myself out of it. 1 ring, 2, then voicemail. "Hey, it's Everett. Leave something or text me instead. Probably faster." I didn't leave a message. I hung up and placed the phone face down beside me. A part of me still wanted to believe he hadn't meant it, that maybe Mara had pressured him, that maybe he just didn't know how to stand up to her yet. But that was a convenient lie, and I'd lived long enough to know that convenient lies will keep you waiting in an empty hallway with your coat still on. I turned the photo frame face down and stood. My legs ached more these days, not the kind of ache a warm bath could fix. I walked to the kitchen and started rinsing out the coffee pot when my phone buzzed again. But it wasn't Everett. It was Lydia, and she didn't usually call unless something was wrong. It was 7 days after the housewarming when Everett finally called. Not to apologize, not to invite me over. He called in a panic. "Mom," he said, breathless, like he'd been running. "We've got a situation." I sat down slowly, the cordless phone pressed against my ear. "Go on." He launched into it without a pause. The final inspection had failed. Something about foundation shifts, unsafe wiring, a drainage problem they never caught. I already knew what happened before he said it out loud. "You didn't get the permits," I said. There was a pause. "Well, Mara's uncle knew a guy who could do it faster, cheaper." Cheaper, of course. I had given them the names of licensed contractors. I had offered to help manage the permits myself. But they didn't want my guidance. They just wanted my check. "They're threatening to revoke occupancy," he said. "We might have to vacate until it's resolved." I stayed silent. "I was hoping," he added, slower now, "maybe you could help us out, just until we sort it." I almost asked what help meant. Money, a place to stay, a miracle? He kept talking. "Mara's freaking out. Her parents are embarrassed. The neighbors are gossiping. I didn't know who else to call." "Not, I'm sorry, not we were wrong, just we need something." I stood and walked to the window, holding the phone to my chest. Outside, the wind had picked up. The tree branches scratched against the glass like they were trying to remind me of something I already knew. When I brought the phone back to my ear, I said, "I'll think about it." "Think about it," he repeated, surprised. "I'll call you back." Then I hung up. Not because I was angry. I wasn't. Not anymore. I was just tired of being summoned like a fire extinguisher, useful only when everything burned. I poured the rest of my coffee down the sink and watched it swirl away. Then I went to the file cabinet in the hall closet and pulled out a folder I hadn't opened in 3 years. Inside was the name of the trust, the deed, and the backup plan. Lydia met me at a corner booth in the same cafe we'd used for years, back when her hands still shook from courtroom battles, and mine were stained with drafting ink. She arrived with a manila folder tucked neatly under her arm and a firm nod that said she already knew. "You brought the documents?" I asked. "Of course," she said, sliding the folder across the table. "You never took your name off anything. The trust is still intact. Horizon Property Holdings owns the house, and Horizon is still tied to your personal trust." I opened the folder and scanned the contents. Legal summaries, the original deed, trustee agreements with my signature dated 3 years back. Lydia's attention to detail hadn't changed. "He doesn't know," I said. "No?" she replied. "And if you hadn't called me first, I'd bet anything he'd be trying to sell that house out from under you." I didn't respond. I just stirred my coffee, letting the heat rise into my face like steam might wash away the ache in my chest. "You want me to draft a formal eviction?" she asked. I shook my head. "Not yet. I want to see if he even bothers calling again." Lydia leaned back. "You're calm. I thought you'd be livid." I took a long sip. "He asked me to leave what I still legally own." She smiled softly. You always were the one holding the real cards. The waitress brought our check. I paid it without blinking. Lydia tried to protest, but I waved her off. There were some habits I didn't mind keeping. Back at home, I placed the folder in the center of my dining table and laid my palm flat on top of it. I wasn't angry, but I was finished pretending this was a misunderstanding. If Everett wanted to play landlord in a house he didn't own, then he was about to learn who built the walls and paid for the roof, and more importantly, who still held the keys. The locksmith arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, young, polite, no questions. I handed him the paperwork Lydia had drawn up, and he nodded like he'd seen stranger things in nicer neighborhoods. Whole system or just the front and garage? He asked. All of it, I said. Codes, remotes, even the keypads. Start fresh. By 10:30, the locks were changed. By noon, the movers had boxed up everything I told them to. Nothing personal, no clothes, no framed photos, no keepsakes, just the few things I had stored there. Cookware I'd brought as a gift, the books I'd left in the built-in shelves of the guest room that no longer had a name on the door. I gave them a quiet nod when they finished. They didn't ask where I wanted the boxes. I simply pointed to my car. On the door, I taped Lydia's letterhead, an official notice outlining the trust's legal ownership and the temporary suspension of occupancy. Short, direct, undeniable. I left the original deed in an envelope inside the mailbox addressed to Everett with a sticky note that read, "In case you forgot whose name was on it." By the time they arrived, somewhere between late lunch and early panic, I was parked a block away. I watched them from the side mirror. Mara walked up first, typing furiously into the keypad. Nothing. She tried again. Still locked. Everett fumbled with his phone, then his key fob, then knocked. There was no answer to give. She said something sharp. He said something louder. Her arms flailed, his face flushed. I didn't feel smug. I didn't feel much at all. They stood there for a long time before Everett finally saw the paper on the door. He snatched it down, skimmed it, and his shoulders dropped. He didn't look up. He didn't look around. They had no idea I was still close enough to hear the silence between them. I turned the key in the ignition and drove away slowly, like someone who had just finished cleaning out a room she no longer planned to enter again. The key slid into the new lock without resistance. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of wood polish and something else. Lavender, maybe. Not mine, but harmless enough. The thermostat had been reset. The digital clock on the microwave blinked. A house, waiting for its rhythm. I moved through the space slowly, like I was reacquainting myself with something I'd once lent out and finally gotten back. Nothing had changed structurally, but it felt different now. Or maybe I did. The guest room still had the cream-colored curtains I had sewn for it. I ran my hand along the edge of the dresser, the one I had refinished myself in the fall before Everett's wedding. I didn't check the drawers. I didn't need to. In the kitchen, I set a new vase on the counter, sunflowers bold and unapologetic. I filled it with water from the tap, adjusted the stems until they stood proud. The old coffee maker was still where I left it. I rinsed it twice before starting a fresh brew. Dark roast, no sugar. While it brewed, I opened the windows. Not all the way, just enough to let the breeze move through. It carried the scent of damp earth and mowed grass, stripping the space of what came before. I found one of my old books still on the shelf, The Secret Garden, spine cracked, pages soft with age. I took it to the breakfast nook and sat down, the mug warm between my hands, the chair sighing beneath me like an old friend. The silence was different now. It didn't press on my ears or weigh on my shoulders. It expanded, gave me room. I didn't know what Everett and Mara would do next. I suspected calls would come, apologies dressed in confusion. But for now, none of that mattered. This house was mine again, not because the law said so, but because I had finally decided to make it so. I turned the page, sipped my coffee, and let the morning pass without hurry. By afternoon, Lydia would arrive to help me sort the mail. The first message came that evening, Everett's voice low and halting. "Mom, we didn't mean for it to go like this. Please call me." I didn't. The second message arrived the next morning. Mara, this time, her voice cracking mid-sentence. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize how much this would hurt you. We messed up." I listened, then deleted both. It was 2 days later when they finally came in person. No warning, just a knock at the front door followed by the doorbell. I stood for a moment, letting the sound ring out into silence, then opened it. Everett looked older, sleepless. Mara's mascara had smudged beneath her eyes. "Can we come in?" he asked. I stepped aside, said nothing. They stood in the kitchen, the sunflower still fresh on the counter beside them. Neither reached for a seat. Neither reached for me. Everett spoke first. "We didn't think you'd react like this." "I didn't react," I said calmly. "I acted." Mara's lip trembled. "We were wrong. We see that now." I waited. Everett took a step closer. "We're sorry, Mom, really. We'll do whatever it takes to fix this." I finally looked up from my coffee mug. "I'm not angry," I said. "I'm just no longer available." He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, then thought better of it. "I gave you everything," I continued. "But I can't keep giving when there's no space for me. Not in your life, not in your house, not even in your photographs." Mara started to cry quietly. I stayed seated. Everett looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time. The table I'd bought, the curtains I'd sewn, the light that filtered through windows he didn't pay for. He nodded once, then took his wife's hand. They left without slamming the door. They didn't ask for the key. I stood after they were gone and poured the remaining coffee into the sink. My hands didn't shake. That night, I slept with the windows cracked open and my phone turned off. The check cleared on a Tuesday morning. I watched the confirmation email appear in my inbox, then closed the laptop without rereading it. Half the house's value now belonged to a local housing nonprofit, an organization I'd followed for years, but never imagined being able to support in this way. I didn't tell Everett. I didn't need to. That Sunday, I set the table for 4. Lydia brought over a lemon tart from the bakery we both liked. My neighbor Louise arrived with homemade scones and stories about her cat's latest war with the squirrels. And my goddaughter Ruthie came by with her little boy Eli, who carried a toy dinosaur in one hand and a crumpled drawing in the other. I poured the coffee while Lydia arranged the plates. The kitchen buzzed with conversation, the kind that doesn't demand attention, but invites it. I moved slowly but without stiffness, no longer waiting for the ache in my chest that had lived there for weeks to return. It didn't. Eli sat on the floor near my feet, coloring with quiet focus. Louise told a story that made Lydia laugh so hard she nearly spilled her drink. I smiled more than I spoke. I didn't feel the need to explain anything. Not the deed, not the eviction, not the distance that had grown and stayed. After everyone left, I walked out to the porch and stared at the new welcome mat I'd ordered. Simple. No flourish. Just 5 words printed clean across the surface. No one here is uninvited. It wasn't a warning. It was a choice. I swept the porch and refilled the bird feeder. The house felt lighter now, not because it had fewer people, but because the people it held were here without obligation, without guilt, without entitlement. I locked the door behind me and placed the empty cups in the sink. As the sun dipped below the roofline, I stood by the window with one final sip of coffee and watched the birds settle in the trees. Tomorrow I'd call the nonprofit and ask how else I could help.